The invitation came on a Tuesday. It was printed on material that was not paper, sent by a species that did not use postal systems, and it told Oren Surat that humanity had been granted a seat at the Grand Conclave of Worlds. He read it twice, set it down on his desk, and finished his lunch before responding. That was the thing about Oren. He never rushed. He was 51 years old, had spent 20 years practicing contract law in 3 different countries, and had the kind of face that made people think he was listening to something far away even when he was looking directly at them. The Earth Council had chosen him as humanity's delegate because, as one council member put it, he is the only person we have who reads the footnotes. Another member had added, he once found a clause in a municipal water agreement that saved a city $400 million in penalties. The first member had nodded and said, exactly. Conclave Station Orin 9 was enormous in the way that made human engineering feel like a school project. It sat at the junction of 7 trade corridors, housed over 4,000 permanent residents from 60 species, and had been in continuous operation for longer than humanity had been writing things down. When Oren arrived through the docking port, dragging a single travel bag and carrying a data tablet under his arm, the station's automated greeting system addressed him in 12 languages before finding the right one. He was shown to humanity's designated suite. It was located in the outer ring, near the maintenance corridors, and the window faced a cargo bay. He noted this without complaint and unpacked. The first session of the Grand Conclave began the following morning in a hall large enough to land aircraft in. Oren found humanity's assigned table near the back. It was smaller than the others. He sat down, arranged his tablet and 3 pins in a neat row, and looked around the room. Every other delegation had brought staff. The Kethare Dominion had 47 people in matching gray coats. The Sorvan Collective had a delegation of 20 with a separate table just for their documents. The Muri Assembly had brought 11 members, each wearing ceremonial collars that apparently indicated rank, and 3 of them were already having a side conversation that did not involve paying attention to anything happening in the hall. Nobody looked at the human table. Director Velos opened the session. He was the Conclave's senior arbiter, a tall species called the Orini, with a long face and a manner that communicated he found most of what he did beneath him. He welcomed new and returning members, moved through 3 procedural items at speed, and then recognized Ambassador Druin of the Kethare Dominion. Druin stood. He was broad, confident, and spoke the way people do when they have never been told they were wrong. He moved to reduce humanity's provisional trade routes by 60%. He cited Compact Subsection 14, Article 9, which stated that provisional members could not hold routes classified as strategically vital until full ratification was complete. He said humanity's current routes exceeded what was appropriate for a civilization at its stage of development. He said this with a small smile. Several delegations signaled immediate support. Velos called the vote. It passed in under 2 minutes. Oren wrote something on his tablet. Not a protest, not a motion. He wrote 2 words. He underlined them. Then he raised his hand and asked, in a calm and pleasant voice, whether the session transcripts would be available in full by the end of the day. Velos said yes, as was standard. Oren thanked him and sat back down. Around him, various delegations were already moving on to other conversations. One aide from the Sorvan table glanced over at the single human sitting alone and then looked away without particular interest. A Muri delegate said something to a colleague in their own language, and both of them briefly found it funny. Oren did not speak Muri, but he recognized a certain kind of laughter. That evening, he went to the station's public archive and made a request. He asked for the complete text of the Compact of Worlds. All editions, all amendments, all appendices and supplementary volumes. The archive attendant, a young Arini, looked at him for a moment. She told him the complete compact ran to over 900,000 pages across 12 volumes, and that even the compressed digital version required a significant amount of storage allocation. Oren said that was fine. She asked if he wanted a summary index instead. Many delegates preferred the summary index. He said he wanted the full text. She processed the request, handed him a storage chip, and watched him walk back toward the outer ring with the quiet expression of someone who had just done something they did not fully understand. Oren got back to his room, made a cup of coffee, and opened Volume 1. The light in Room 7 stayed on that night, and the 11 nights after that. Cleaning staff passed the door and saw the light under it each time. Not one of them thought to mention it. Not one of the 60 species on the station thought to ask what the human was doing alone in his small room, reading. In the Grand Conclave Hall, the vote had already been filed and forgotten. Drun had moved on. Velos had signed off on 17 other items before the week was out. They had taken his routes. They had put him at a small table near the back. They had laughed in a language they assumed he did not understand. The light stayed on. 3 weeks passed on Orin 9, the way time passes in places that never go dark. The station had no natural light cycle, so the residents made their own rhythms. The market corridors got loud at certain hours. The docking bays got quiet at others. Orin Surratt worked through all of it without much regard for either. He had finished Volume 3 on a Wednesday and moved immediately to Volume 4. He kept a separate document open on his tablet at all times, a running list organized by subject. He cross-referenced clauses. He noted contradictions. He flagged 8 sections he found genuinely interesting and 1 section he found extraordinary. He did not tell anyone about any of it. The next session of the Grand Conclave arrived. Orin took his small table near the back, set out his pens, and waited. Ambassador Drun was on his feet early. The Kethare Dominion had prepared a new motion. He called it a developmental surcharge, a fee applied to vessels from young civilizations passing through shared transit corridors. He said it was standard policy under the compact, a practical measure to offset the administrative cost of managing traffic from species that lacked experience in proper corridor protocols. He said this with the smooth ease of someone who had said it before, in other rooms, to other small delegations. He cited 3 supporting clauses. He proposed a rate. He smiled at Drun's allies across the room, and they nodded the way allies do when the outcome is already understood. Velos prepared to call the vote. Orin raised his hand. The room did not go quiet exactly, but something shifted. It was the first time the human delegate had spoken in open session. Velos recognized him with a small gesture that communicated mild surprise. Orin said he had only one question before the vote. He said he wanted to make sure he understood the motion correctly, for his own records. He asked Velos to confirm, for the official transcript, the definition of the word vessel as it was being used in the motion. Velos looked briefly at him the way people look at someone who has asked what they consider a very simple question. He said the standard compact definition applied. Any craft capable of independent interstellar transit. Orin thanked him. He said that was very helpful. He said he had no further questions. The vote passed. The surcharge was approved. Orin wrote something on his tablet, and the session moved on. That evening, Commander Scylla came to his room. She ran the small human logistics team on Orin 9, 3 people managing the practical side of humanity's presence on the station. She was practical in the way that people become when they have spent years solving problems with limited resources. She sat down across from Orin and asked him how bad the surcharge was going to be. He said it was not going to apply to anything. She looked at him. He explained. The compact definition Velos had confirmed on record, the same definition Drun's motion was built on, excluded automated craft. Any vessel without a crew did not meet the definition. He had found this in Volume 3, cross-referenced it against the surcharge motion language, and confirmed it the moment Velos spoke. He told her to have every human resupply drone reflagged as an automated relay unit before the surcharge took effect. The paperwork was straightforward. He had already drafted it. She started to ask about the crewed ships. He said he had handled that already. Volume 7, Clause 4 of the compact provided an exemption for ships registered as diplomatic courier craft. The exemption was old and rarely used because most species did not know it existed. He had re-registered the entire human fleet under that classification 10 days ago, while Drun was still drafting the surcharge motion. Scylla was quiet for a moment. Then she asked how long he had known the surcharge was coming. He said he had not known for certain, but the pattern was obvious. Restrict the routes first. Add fees second. Squeeze the new member until they either comply or leave. He had read the same sequence applied to 4 previous small civilizations in the compact's records. He had simply prepared before the second step arrived. She asked what happened to those 4 civilizations. He said 3 of them had accepted the fees and spent decades paying them. He closed the volume he had opened and set it on the table. The 4th one left the conclave entirely and spent 80 years without galactic trade access before petitioning to rejoin on worse terms. Silas said that was grim. He agreed that it was. Then he handed her the reflagging paperwork and asked her to have it submitted by morning. She left. Oren opened Volume 5. When the surcharge took effect 4 days later, the automated systems ran the numbers. 0 human ships met the definition of vessel under the confirmed compact language. 0 crewed human ships lacked diplomatic courier status. The surcharge collected nothing. The Kethare Dominion's trade office filed an inquiry. The inquiry was reviewed against the compact text. The text said what it said. The definitions had been confirmed on record by the senior arbiter himself. Drun received the report and read it twice. Then a third time. He called Velos. Velos spent an hour going through the text and transcript. Then he sat back and said something in his own language that carried a clear meaning without translating well. The human had not broken a rule. He had asked one question, listened, and used the answer. Velos looked at Oren's file with actual attention for the first time. Former contract lawyer, 20 years in practice, requested the full compact on his first evening on the station. He had not thought to worry about that until now. Word travels fast on a station with 4,000 residents and very thin walls between them. Not the specific details, not yet, but the shape of a thing spreads quickly. Within a week of the surcharge collecting nothing, there was a feeling in the corridors of Oren 9 that something had shifted, though most people could not have said exactly what. The Kethare Dominion could have said what. They were not pleased about it. Drun spent several days in meetings with allied delegations. The Sorvan Collective and the Muri Assembly both had reasons of their own to want humanity kept small and manageable. A new species with full trade access and no fees to pay was an inconvenience. A new species that had made Drun look foolish in front of a recorded session was something they found more personally motivating. They drafted a censure motion. It accused humanity of procedural manipulation, of acting against the spirit of the compact, and it called for a formal review that would suspend humanity's provisional membership pending an investigation. They cited Volume 1, Article 3, which stated that any member acting against the spirit of the compact could be suspended by majority vote. It was, on paper, a serious motion. Suspension pending review could take years. Years without trade access. Years at the back of every negotiation. Drun filed it on a Thursday with the signatures of 11 delegations attached. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Oren read the filing on Thursday evening. He read it carefully, the way he read everything. And then he opened a different document on his tablet. He cross-referenced Volume 1, Article 3, and then read Article 3 in full, including the subsections that the filing had not cited. He found Subsection 2. Subsection 2 stated that any motion affecting the membership status of a provisional or full member required a minimum of 30 standard days of public notice before a vote could be held. The notice had to be posted to the official conclave record and made available to all member delegations. The censure filing had been posted that Thursday. Monday was 4 days away. Oren drafted a counter-filing that night. It was 2 pages long. It cited Subsection 2 directly, noted the date of the original filing, and formally requested that the scheduled vote be declared procedurally invalid. He submitted it to the conclave record at just past midnight. Monday arrived. The hall was fuller than usual. Censure hearings drew attention, and this one had the added element of involving the species that had been quietly embarrassing the Dominion for several weeks. Delegations that had no stake in the outcome came anyway, the way people slowed down to look at something unexpected on the side of a road. Velos opened the session. He acknowledged the censure motion. He acknowledged the counter-filing. He spent several minutes reviewing both in silence, with the particular expression of someone who already knows what they are going to find and is not enjoying finding it. Then he said, with visible effort at keeping his voice neutral, that the censure vote could not proceed. He cited Compact Volume 1, Article 3, Subsection 2. He noted the date of the original filing and the date of the scheduled vote. He said the motion required 30 standard days of notice and had been posted 4 days ago. The vote would need to be rescheduled to no earlier than 30 days from the original filing date. The hall was quiet. Drun looked at the counter-filing on his screen. Then he looked at Oren. Oren was writing something in his notes. He did not look up. Velos closed the session early. There was nothing left on the agenda that anyone wanted to discuss out loud. In the corridor outside, Drun caught up with Oren. He stepped close and told Oren in plain language that this process had limits, that the Conclave had ways of handling situations the written rules did not cover, that Oren should think carefully about his position. Oren listened. Then he asked, in the same calm tone he used for everything, whether Drun was aware that this corridor was classified as an official Conclave transit zone under Volume 5, Article 17, and that any recorded exchange between delegates in a monitored zone was automatically added to the official station record. He said this without looking at the ceiling where the monitoring points were. Drun looked at the ceiling. Then he straightened, adjusted his coat, and walked away without saying anything else. A voice came from behind Oren. Small, careful. It belonged to a young clerk named Ren, a species called the Tavesi, slight and pale-eyed, who worked in the Conclave's document processing office. Ren said he had been filing Conclave records for 9 years. He said Oren was the first delegate in his memory to invoke Article 3, Subsection 2 on procedural notice grounds. Oren asked if the subsection was commonly known. Ren said it was in the document, just not a part people read. Oren asked Ren if he was good with research. Ren said he was very good with research. Oren said he was going to need help with indexing over the next few weeks and asked if Ren wanted to assist during his off hours. He said he could not pay much, but the work would be interesting. Ren said yes before Oren finished the sentence. They walked back toward the outer ring together. Behind them, the session record was logging every word, stamping every timestamp, doing exactly what it had always done. Nobody had ever minded before. It had never mattered who was paying attention. It mattered now. Ren turned out to be exceptional. He had a memory that worked differently from most people Oren had encountered. He did not just remember where things were in a document. He remembered the texture of them, the way certain clauses sat next to other clauses, the places where the language changed slightly in a way that suggested different authors writing at different times. He had spent 9 years processing Conclave filings and had absorbed the compact the way people absorb the layout of a building they work in every day, not by studying it, just by moving through it for long enough. Together, they made a list. It took 12 days. Oren would identify a section, Ren would trace its history, find when it was written and by whom, flag whether it had ever been invoked, and what the outcome had been. They worked in the evenings in Oren's room, with the station's ambient hum for company and Oren's notes filling more and more of the wall beside his desk. What they found was an archive of good intentions nobody had bothered to use. The compact had been written in pieces over 4,000 years. The oldest sections were composed when the galaxy's current powers were themselves young, and those authors had put in protections for small civilizations. Fair access provisions, dispute mechanisms, procedural shields. As those same civilizations grew larger, they quietly wrote amendments around the protections without removing the originals. The old text was still there, just buried under decades of additions everyone had agreed, without saying so, to treat as the actual rules. The list Oren and Ren made had 41 entries. Some were minor. Some were very useful. One of them was extraordinary. Compact Volume 9, Article 44. It had been written 3,800 years ago by a coalition of species most of whom no longer existed. It stated that any member civilization denied equal trade access for more than 90 consecutive days as a result of actions taken by other compact members was entitled to file for remedial equivalence. Remedial equivalence triggered a formal audit of every trade restriction placed on that civilization, conducted by a neutral panel with binding authority to reverse any restriction found to be procedurally improper. If the audit confirmed violations, the filing civilization was entitled not just to restoration of what was taken, but to compensatory access rights equal to the assessed value of the denial period. Oren read it 4 times. Then he asked Ren when humanity's trade routes had been reduced. Ren checked the record. He gave Oren the exact date. Oren counted forward. He counted slowly, and then he counted again, because he wanted to be sure. 97 days ago. He set down his pen. He looked at the wall for a moment. Then he asked Ren to find him everything on the procedural requirements for filing remedial equivalence. Ren found it in under 10 minutes. The filing required documentation of the restriction, proof of duration, and a formally constituted neutral panel drawn from member species with no direct stake in the outcome. The panel had binding authority. Its ruling could not be appealed to the full council without a unanimous vote of all senior arbiters, which required every single one of them to agree, a provision so difficult to trigger that it had never been used. Oren filed for remedial equivalence the next morning. He did it quietly, through the standard document submission system, the same one Ren worked in. The filing went into the processing queue at just past 9 in the morning, logged between a Muri trade extension and a Sorvin administrative update. It sat there for 4 hours before a senior processing clerk opened it, read the first paragraph, and went immediately to find their supervisor. The supervisor read it, then called the records office. The records office confirmed that Article 44 was, in fact, still active text, had never been formally amended or rescinded, and that the procedural requirements as cited were accurate. By mid-afternoon, the Kethra Dominion's legal office had received a notification. By early evening, 3 other major delegations had been informed. Velos received a copy with a flag on it that his staff rarely used, reserved for documents requiring his personal attention before the next session. Oren was in his room eating dinner when Sila knocked. She had heard from the logistics side. She had pulled the filing herself and read it. She sat down, looked at him, and asked what he expected the audit to find. He said approximately 40 violations, possibly fewer depending on how the neutral panel read 3 of the more ambiguous restrictions. He said 36 solid ones would be enough. She asked enough for what? He said enough to more than double humanity's current trade access when compensatory rights were applied. She was quiet long enough that the station's ventilation system cycled once before she spoke again. She asked who would be on the neutral panel. He said the compact required it to be drawn from members with no direct interest. That excluded the major powers. That left the smaller civilizations, the ones being squeezed by the same systems used on humanity. He said he did not think they would be unsympathetic. Sila looked at the filing, then at the wall of notes. She had known Oren 2 years and never once seen him surprised by anything. She had sometimes found that unsettling. Right now she found it reassuring. She asked if Drew knew yet. Oren said his legal office had been notified about 4 hours ago. He picked up his fork and finished his dinner. Across the station, several lights were now also on late into the night. Different species, different suites. All of them reading the same 900,000-page document at speed, looking for what else the human had already found. The neutral panel took 11 days to constitute. 3 species, the Tavesi, who were small and had been paying inflated corridor fees to the Dominion for decades. The Orith, whose grain shipping lanes had been quietly rerouted twice by Sorvin collective motions. And the Belundi, who had never formally complained about anything but kept extremely good records. All 3 were confirmed as having no direct stake in the outcome. All 3 accepted the appointment. The remedial equivalence hearing opened on a day when the station's outer corridors were more crowded than they had been in years. Delegations that had no formal role attended anyway. Even species who had never once been to a legal session found reasons to be in the observation galleries. In 4,000 years of the compact, remedial equivalence had been filed twice. It had never reached a full hearing either time. Oren arrived with Sila and Ren. He carried a single folder and his tablet. The panel sat at the elevated bench. The Kethra Dominion's legal team occupied the respondent's side. They had 12 people. They had submitted 400 pages of preemptive arguments. The lead legal advocate for the Dominion was a senior figure who had been practicing compact law for 30 years, which, by most measures, made him one of the most qualified people in the room. The panel's chair opened proceedings and invited the filing party to present. Oren stood. He did not use notes. He had arranged the 38 documented violations in order of clarity, starting with the ones where the compact language was so plain that argument was close to pointless. He walked through them at a steady pace, citing volume, article, and clause number from memory, occasionally displaying the relevant text on the room's shared screen. He was not dramatic about any of it. He did not editorialize. He stated each violation, cited the relevant text, and presented the record showing the restriction in question. It took most of the first day. On the second day, the Dominion's legal team responded. Their first argument was emergency precedent. They said that reversing the restrictions in question would create instability in existing trade frameworks across multiple corridor systems, that the practical disruption would affect dozens of species, and that the panel should weigh this against the strict letter of the text. Oren waited for them to finish. Then he cited Compact Volume 2, Article 1. He read it aloud. No precedent established outside formal ruling may override the written text of the compact. He noted that the precedent the Dominion was citing had never been formally ruled on by any panel or arbiter. It was simply how things had been done. Custom was not law. The written text was law. The panel chair made a note. The Dominion's team regrouped. Their second argument concerned humanity's provisional status. They argued that the protections being invoked were written with full members in mind, and that provisional members occupied a lesser category of protection under the compact. This was the argument Oren had been waiting for. He produced a document. It was the original ratification offer extended to humanity at first contact, 5 years prior. He put it on the shared screen. He pointed to the relevant paragraph, 3rd page, 2nd section, where the conclave had explicitly granted humanity full procedural protections as a condition of the ratification agreement, as an incentive for humanity to accept provisional membership rather than remaining outside the compact entirely. The document bore the Dominion's own seal. Drun's predecessor had signed it. Oren said humanity's provisional status applied only to voting rights in general session. Every procedural protection in the compact applied in full from the date of the original agreement. He said he was happy to provide the panel with certified copies. The panel chair said that would not be necessary. They could see the document clearly on the screen. The hearing ran into its 3rd day. Oren did not make speeches. He worked through the remaining violations the same way he had worked through the first ones, carefully, with citations. Ren passed documents when needed. Silas sat behind him and said nothing, which was exactly what was required. Near the end of the 3rd day, Oren raised the question of remedy. He did not ask for the original trade routes to be restored. He asked for compensatory access rights under Article 44, equal to the assessed value of 5 years of restricted human trade. He had asked Sila to calculate the number. It went on the shared screen. The room went quiet in a specific way. Not shocked. More like everyone having the same thought at once and nobody wanting to say it first. The panel deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the chair read without preamble. 36 violations confirmed. 2 insufficient for ruling. Compensatory access rights granted. Human trade corridors to be expanded by formal compact order within 30 days. Velos said something under his breath at the end of the ruling. Ren was close enough to hear it. Walking back through the corridors afterward, Ren told Oren that Velos had said he did not know Article 44 existed. Oren said most people did not. Ren said most people did not read past Volume 4. Oren said that was, in his experience, the most expensive mistake you could make. In his inner ring office, Drun submitted his resignation before the station corridors went quiet. Oren read the notification, filed it, and went to sleep at a reasonable hour for the first time in weeks. 6 months after the hearing, the market corridor on Oren 9's second ring was noticeably different. More human freighters docked now, moving through routes that had been closed for 5 years. The traders had adjusted their pricing. They were not happy about it, but the compact ruling was binding. The text said what it said. 3 delegations were waiting in a small conference room off the document processing office. Not the Kethare Dominion. Not the Sorvan Collective. 3 species from the outer rows of the Grand Conclave. The kind who mostly sat quietly and hoped the major powers forgot about them for another season. The Orith were there. A species called the Venery had sent their only delegate. A newer member, the Solon, who had joined 2 years before humanity, sat at the end of the table looking like someone who had not expected the meeting to actually happen. Oren arrived with Ren and a carry case. He sat down, skipped the preamble, and asked each of them to describe the primary restriction they were operating under. He listened without interrupting. When all 3 had finished, he opened the case and removed 3 data chips. Each chip contained an indexed subset of the compact, organized around the specific restrictions each species was facing, with counter provisions flagged, annotated, and cross-referenced. He handed them out. The Venery delegate held her chip carefully, the way you hold something when you are not sure it is real. She asked what he wanted in return. He said nothing. He said the compact worked better when more people used it correctly, and that was in his interest as much as theirs. He did not tell them about the procedural committee he had already put in place. Built from an obscure clause in Volume 6, which gave a group of smaller civilizations blocking authority over any compact amendment affecting provisional or newer member rights. The elder powers could not change the rules now without going through people who had very good reasons to pay attention. The Venery delegate asked how he had found all of this. Her species had been in the compact for 60 years. 60 years of managed disadvantage. How had humanity found in 5 what 60 years had not? He said he had read the document. The whole thing. Most people did not, which had surprised him at first. 900,000 pages was a long document, and people had other things to do. He said he happened to find the footnotes interesting. The solemn delegate laughed. Small, exhausted, but real. Later, walking back through the station alone, Oren thought about the meeting Velos had requested the previous week. They had sat across from each other in a formal room, and Velos had not apologized, because that was not something his species did professionally. He had asked instead what humanity actually wanted from the conclave. Oren had told him, equal standing, rules applied the same way to everyone. Enough room to grow without being quietly pressed back each time humanity reached for something. Velos said he could not promise how other delegations would behave. Oren said he was not asking for promises. He had the compact. Velos had looked at him a moment and said, with what might have been the closest thing to respect his expression could hold, that he believed that was probably true. The call to return to Earth came on a Thursday. Oren packed his single bag and added the 12 volumes of the compact. His copy, margins full of notes, every other page flagged, cross-references in small, even handwriting running along the edges. The Earth Council met him in a quiet room. They asked for a status report. He set a 3-page summary on the table. They looked at the summary, then at the 12 volumes beside it. He told them the galaxy had written 4,000 years of rules, assuming no one patient enough would read all of them. That assumption had been wrong. Humanity now held more trade access than it had been given at ratification, had blocking authority on rule changes, and had the working trust of 7 smaller civilizations using the same tools to fix their own situations. A council member asked what the next step was. He said the next step was coffee. The next phase was less dramatic, but would take longer. He would explain when he got back. He stood and walked to the door. A council member who had said nothing yet spoke before he left. She said it seemed like the galaxy had underestimated them. He paused. He said yes. He said they usually did. He said the important thing was that humanity not make the same mistake about the galaxy. Then he left, and the council sat with 3 pages and 12 volumes, and the quiet feeling of people beginning to understand the shape of what had just changed. Nobody laughed at the human delegate anymore. Some of them had started taking notes.